The ring sparkled under the dim cafe lights, its diamond catching fragments of the fading sunset streaming through the window. Emma froze, her breath hitching as Daniel slid off his chair and knelt on one knee in front of her. Conversations around them faded into white noise. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "you are my everything. The reason I wake up every morning and the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Will you marry me?" Her hands trembled as they hovered over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. This was it, the moment she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl. Yet now, faced with the reality of it, doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. For a split second, time seemed to stop. The clinking of coffee cups, the distant hum of traffic outside, even the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows, all dissolved into silence. All that remained was Daniel's hopeful gaze locked onto hers, waiting for her answer. Her voice faltered, barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard, trying to push past the lump forming in her throat. "I don't know what to say." Daniel's smile wavered just slightly, but he recovered quickly, masking his unease with forced optimism. "You don't have to answer right now," he said softly, standing up and slipping the ring back into its velvet box. "Just think about it, okay? Because I want us to build a life together, a family. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine." Emma nodded numbly, her mind racing as she tried to process the weight of his words. Starting a family meant committing fully to their relationship, but it also meant putting her own dreams on hold, at least for now. At 24, she felt caught between two worlds, the one her parents expected of her and the one she desperately wanted to create for herself. As they left the cafe and walked home under the dim streetlights, Emma couldn't shake the uncertainty swirling inside her. Was love really enough to overcome all the obstacles standing in their way? The next morning, Emma woke up with Daniel's words still echoing in her mind. "I want us to build a life together. A family." The thought sent a shiver down her spine, though she couldn't tell if it was excitement or dread. She rolled over in bed, staring at the ceiling as sunlight streamed through the blinds. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence. It was a text from her mother. "Call me when you have a moment. We need to talk." Emma groaned, already dreading the conversation. Her parents had never been subtle about their disapproval of Daniel. From the moment they'd met him during her junior year at university, they'd made their feelings clear. His modest upbringing, his lack of financial security, and his inability to provide for her were constant points of contention. To them, love wasn't enough. Practicality ruled supreme. She glanced at Daniel, who was sound asleep beside her, his chest rising and falling steadily. He looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm brewing inside her, and outside their little bubble. With a sigh, she slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen to call her mother. "Good morning, sweetheart," her mother's voice greeted her, saccharine sweet but laced with an edge of impatience. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Mom," Emma replied cautiously. "What did you want to talk about?" There was a pause, just long enough to make Emma uneasy. "Well," her mother began, her tone shifting to something more serious. "Your father and I have noticed that things seem serious between you and Daniel lately." Emma stiffened. "What do you mean by serious?" "You know exactly what I mean," her mother said sharply. "He's been spending more time at our house, hasn't he? And now we hear rumors that he might be planning to propose." Emma's stomach dropped. Rumors? How could anyone possibly know about last night's proposal? No, Daniel wouldn't have told anyone. Would he? "It's none of your business," Emma snapped, surprising even herself with the sharpness of her tone. "Daniel and I are adults. We don't need your approval for every decision we make." Her mother sighed dramatically, as if Emma's defiance was both expected and exhausting. "Emma, darling, we only want what's best for you. You're young and you have so much potential. Do you really think tying yourself down to someone like Daniel is going to help you achieve your dreams?" Emma clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Someone like Daniel? What does that even mean, Mom? He works hard, he loves me, and he supports me. Isn't that what matters? Her mother's voice hardened. Support isn't everything, Emma. Love doesn't pay the bills. Remember what happened last Christmas, when your father offered to help him financially, and Daniel practically threw it back in his face. Emma flinched at the memory. It had been one of the worst arguments she'd ever witnessed between her fiancé and her parents. Her father, in his usual blunt manner, had handed Daniel an envelope containing a hefty check, saying, "Here, take this. Consider it a gift. Every man needs a leg up sometimes." But instead of gratitude, Daniel's face had turned red with fury. "I don't need your charity," he'd spat, shoving the envelope back toward her father. "I can take care of myself, and Emma, without your money." The room had fallen silent after that, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Emma had tried to smooth things over, but the damage was done. Her parents saw Daniel's refusal as prideful and immature, while Daniel viewed their offer as condescending and insulting. Since then, relations between them had been strained at best. "Mom," Emma said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady, "you don't understand. That wasn't about the money, it was about respect. Dad treated Daniel like he was some charity case, not the man I love. How would you feel if someone did that to Dad?" Her mother scoffed. "Oh please. Your father was only trying to help." But Daniel refuses to see that. He's too stubborn, too proud. And frankly, Emma, I worry that his pride will hold you back. Emma bit her lip, fighting back tears. "You don't get to decide my future, Mom. I love Daniel and I'm happy with him. If you can't accept that, then maybe we shouldn't talk about this anymore." Before her mother could respond, Emma ended the call, her hands trembling. She leaned against the counter, taking deep breaths to calm herself. Why did every conversation with her parents leave her feeling like she was walking on eggshells? A soft knock on the doorframe startled her. Daniel stood there, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a concerned expression. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Emma hesitated, unsure how much to tell him. Finally, she shook her head. "Oh, my mom called. They're upset about us. Again." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, resting his chin on top of her head. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I wish things were easier for you." "So do I," Emma whispered, burying her face in his chest. "But I don't regret choosing you. Not for a second." For a moment, they simply held each other, drawing strength from the comfort of their embrace. But as Emma pulled away and looked into Daniel's eyes, she couldn't shake the nagging question lingering in her mind. Was love really enough to overcome all the obstacles standing in their way? The days that followed were a blur of introspection and mounting pressure. Emma found herself oscillating between excitement about Daniel's proposal and anxiety over what it meant for her future. She loved him deeply, but the idea of starting a family felt like stepping onto a path with no clear exit, a road where her ambitions might fade into the background. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed more focused than ever. He had recently landed a promotion at work, earning a salary that allowed them to live comfortably. For the first time in years, they weren't scraping by on student loans and part-time gigs. But while his career was thriving, Emma remained stuck in limbo. Her job search had yielded nothing but rejection emails and automated responses. Each one chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling increasingly inadequate. One afternoon, as she scrolled through yet another list of open positions, Daniel walked into their tiny apartment carrying takeout bags. "Dinner," he announced cheerfully, setting the food down on the kitchen counter. "Thought we could use a break from ramen noodles." Emma forced a smile, grateful for his effort to lighten the mood. "Thanks. This looks great." As they ate, Daniel glanced at her laptop screen, which displayed a half-written cover letter. "Still looking for jobs?" he asked casually. She nodded, poking at her food with a fork. Nothing promising so far. I feel like I'm wasting my degree." Daniel reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "You're not wasting anything. You'll find something soon. And until then, don't stress too much. We're okay financially. I can handle things for now." His words were meant to comfort her, but they only deepened her unease. The thought of relying solely on him made her stomach churn. Growing up in a wealthy family, she had always prided herself on being independent. Even during college, when her parents offered to pay her tuition, she insisted on working part-time to contribute. Now, here she was, unable to secure a job while Daniel carried the weight of their finances. "I hate feeling like a burden," she admitted quietly, avoiding his gaze. "It's not fair to you." Daniel frowned, squeezing her hand. "You're not a burden, Em. We're a team. That's how relationships work. You support each other. Besides, once we start a family, things will change anyway. Maybe this is just preparation." Emma froze, her fork clattering against her plate. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, clearly sensing her discomfort. "I just mean, kids cost money. A lot of it. If we're going to have a family someday, we'll need to figure out how to balance everything. I know you want a career, but maybe now's the time to think about priorities." Her chest tightened. Priorities? Was he suggesting she give up on her dreams entirely? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. Deep down, she knew he wasn't trying to control her. He genuinely believed he was helping, but his words stung all the same. "I'm not ready to give up on my career," she said finally. Her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. "I want to be able to provide for myself, and for our family if we decide to have one. I don't want to feel like I'm holding you back." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Get that. Really, I do. But sometimes sacrifices have to be made. And honestly, Em, I'd rather have you home with me than stuck in some soul-sucking office job you don't even want." She stared at him, stunned. Did he really think she didn't want a career? Or was he projecting his own fears onto her? Either way, the conversation left her feeling unsettled. Later that night, as Daniel slept beside her, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling. His breathing was slow and steady, but her mind raced with unanswered questions. Could she truly balance motherhood and ambition? Would Daniel understand if she chose the latter over the former? And most importantly, could their relationship survive the inevitable compromises ahead? A week later, Emma received an unexpected invitation from her father, lunch at his country club. Normally, she would have declined. Her interactions with her parents had become increasingly strained, but curiosity got the better of her. What did he want now? When she arrived, her father was already seated at a table near the window, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she approached, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Emma, thanks for coming." She slid into the chair opposite him, folding her hands in her lap. "What's this about, Dad?" He set his phone aside and leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Your mother mentioned your recent discussions about marriage with Daniel." Emma bristled immediately. "And?" Her father sighed, rubbing his temples as if preparing for a difficult conversation. "Look, sweetheart, I know you care about him. But marrying someone like Daniel, it's not just about love. It's about practicality, stability. Can he really give you the life you deserve?" Emma clenched her jaw, resisting the urge to snap. "Daniel works hard, Dad. He provides for us. Isn't that enough?" "It's not about providing," her father countered, his tone sharpening. "It's about opportunities, growth. You come from a privileged background, Emma. You have resources most people can only dream of. Why throw that away for someone who refuses to accept help?" Emma's cheeks burned with indignation. "Because it's not about throwing anything away. Daniel doesn't want your money because of how you treated him last Christmas. You insulted him, Dad. You acted like he wasn't good enough." Her father waved a dismissive hand. "That's water under the bridge. What matters is the future. Which brings me to why I asked you here today." He paused, meeting her gaze directly. "I want to fund a business for you. Something you can manage yourself. A bakery, perhaps, or a boutique. Whatever interests you." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "A business?" "Yes. Think about it, you'd have creative control, financial independence, and the chance to build something meaningful. Plus, it would keep you busy while Daniel focuses on his career. Everyone wins. For a moment she was tempted. The idea of owning her own business sparked a flicker of excitement. But almost instantly, doubt crept in. Accepting her father's offer would mean involving him in her life, and potentially alienating Daniel. "I'll think about it," she said cautiously, rising from her seat. "But I can't promise anything." Her father nodded, though his eyes betrayed his disappointment. "Fair enough. Just remember, Emma, I only want what's best for you." As she left the country club, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her father's intentions weren't entirely altruistic. Still, the seed had been planted. Could starting a business be the solution to her problems? Or would it create new ones? The days following her lunch with her father were filled with restless nights and endless second-guessing. Emma couldn't stop thinking about his offer, or the implications it carried. On paper it sounded perfect. Financial independence, creative freedom, and a chance to build something of her own. But in reality, it felt like a double-edged sword. She spent hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept peacefully beside her. His steady breathing was a comforting rhythm, yet it only amplified the chaos swirling inside her mind. Could she really accept her father's money without jeopardizing her relationship with Daniel? And even if she managed to keep things under wraps, would the guilt eat away at her? By midweek, the pressure became unbearable. She decided to confide in someone who had always been her sounding board. Her best friend, Sophie. They met at their favorite cafe, a cozy little place tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of baked goods, creating an atmosphere that usually calmed Emma. Today, however, even the familiar surroundings couldn't soothe her frayed nerves. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Sophie observed as they settled into a booth by the window. "What's going on?" Emma hesitated, stirring her latte absent-mindedly. "It's complicated." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "When is it ever not with you?" "Bill." Taking a deep breath, Emma recounted everything. The proposal, her parents' disapproval, her father's business offer, and her growing doubts about balancing love and ambition. As she spoke, Sophie listened intently, nodding occasionally but mostly letting Emma vent. When she finally finished, Sophie leaned back in her seat, tapping her fingers against the table thoughtfully. "Okay, so let me get this straight. You're torn between accepting your dad's offer, which could give you the independence you crave, and risking Daniel walking out because he hates the idea of taking anything from your family. Am I missing anything?" Emma shook her head. "No, that pretty much sums it up." Sophie sighed, running a hand through her curly hair. "Well, first off, you need to figure out what you want. Not what your parents or Daniel want. This is your life, Em. At the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with the consequences." "I know," Emma said softly. "But how do I choose? If I take the business, I risk losing Daniel. If I don't, I might resent him later for holding me back. Or maybe," Sophie countered gently, "you're looking at this all wrong. Maybe it's not about choosing between them, it's about finding a way to make both work. Have you talked to Daniel about any of this?" Emma winced. "Not really. I mean, we've discussed my career struggles, but I haven't mentioned Dad's offer. I'm scared of how he'll react." Sophie gave her a knowing look. "And that's exactly why you should tell him. Keeping secrets never ends well, especially in relationships. Trust me, I've seen enough rom-coms to know that." Despite herself, Emma chuckled. Leave it to Sophie to lighten the mood with a movie reference. Still, her words struck a chord. Avoiding the conversation wouldn't solve anything. It would only prolong the inevitable. "You're right," Emma admitted reluctantly. "I'll talk to him tonight." Sophie smiled encouragingly. "Good. And whatever happens, remember, you're stronger than you think. You've got this." As they parted ways later that afternoon, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. Talking to Daniel wouldn't magically fix everything, but it was a start. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, There was a way to reconcile her dreams with her love for him. That evening after dinner, Emma suggested they go for a walk. Daniel agreed readily, sensing that something was weighing on her mind. They strolled through the park where they'd shared countless memories over the years, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rhythmic crunch of their footsteps on the gravel path provided a soothing backdrop to Emma's racing thoughts. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you remember our first date here?" she asked, gesturing toward the pond where ducks paddled lazily in the fading light. Daniel grinned, his eyes lighting up with nostalgia. "How could I forget? You tripped over a tree root and nearly face-planted into the water. I thought I'd blown it for sure." Emma laughed, the memory bringing warmth to her cheeks. "Yeah, but then you helped me up and made some terrible joke about gravity. Somehow it worked." "It must have," Daniel teased, nudging her playfully. "You stuck around long enough to put up with me." Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence as they continued walking. Eventually, Emma stopped near a bench overlooking the pond, her expression turning serious. "Daniel," she began hesitantly, "we need to talk." He sat down beside her, concern etched across his features. "What's wrong?" She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. "My dad offered to fund a business for me, a chance to be financially independent and pursue something meaningful. But I'm worried about how you'll feel about it." Daniel stiffened visibly, his jaw tightening. "Are you considering it?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "Part of me wants to say yes, it could solve so many problems. But another part of me knows how much you hate the idea of accepting help from my family. I don't want to lose you, Daniel." For a long moment, he didn't respond. He stared out at the pond, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. "I won't lie, Em, it bothers me. Not because I think you're incapable of succeeding on your own, but because of what it represents. Your parents have always looked down on me, and taking their money feels like admitting defeat. Like I can't provide for you." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's not about admitting defeat. It's about giving us options. Freedom to build the life we want without worrying about money all the time." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I hear you, and I trust you. But I need you to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That no matter what happens, we face it together. No secrets, no assumptions. We communicate openly, okay?" Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she nodded. "Okay." As they sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma realized that their journey wasn't just about navigating external challenges. It was about learning to lean on each other when the road got rough. Together, they could weather whatever storms lay ahead. The next morning, Emma woke up with a sense of resolve. After her conversation with Daniel the previous evening, she felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. They hadn't solved everything, but they'd taken the first step toward understanding each other better. Now, it was time to tackle another source of tension, her mother. She called her mom during breakfast, bracing herself for what promised to be an emotionally charged discussion. Her mother answered on the second ring, her tone clipped and formal. "Emma, is everything all right?" "No, Mom, everything isn't all right," Emma replied firmly, surprising even herself with her boldness. "We need to talk about how you and Dad treat Daniel." There was a pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Emma said, her voice rising slightly. "Every time we're together, you make snide comments or passive-aggressive remarks about him. You act like he's not good enough for me, like his background defines who he is as a person." Her mother sighed heavily, as if Emma's words were both expected and exhausting. "Darling, we're only concerned about your future. Daniel may be a nice young man, but he doesn't come from the same world as us. He doesn't understand the responsibilities that come with wealth, or the expectations." "That's not true," Emma shot back, her anger bubbling to the surface. "Daniel works harder than anyone I know. He's kind, supportive, and loyal. None of those things have anything to do with money. And besides, I don't care about responsibilities or expectations. All I care about is being happy with him." Her mother's tone softened, though it still carried an edge of condescension. "Emma, sweetheart, I understand that you love him. But love isn't always enough. What happens when real-life challenges arise? When bills pile up or emergencies happen? Will Daniel be able to handle them?" Emma clenched her fists, fighting back tears of frustration. "He already handles them. He supports me every single day, even when I doubt myself. He believes in me more than anyone else ever has, including you and Dad." Her mother fell silent for a moment, and Emma wondered if she'd finally gotten through to her. But then came the inevitable rebuttal. "Fine, Emma. If you're so determined to marry him, go ahead. Just don't come crying to us when things fall apart." The line went dead before Emma could respond. She stared at her phone, her hands trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. For years, she'd hoped her parents would come around, that they'd see Daniel for the incredible man he was. But now, she realized that might never happen, and that hurt more than she cared to admit. As she set the phone down, Daniel walked into the kitchen, concern etched across his face. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Emma shook her head, blinking back tears. "Oh, but it will be." Later that evening, as they curled up on the couch watching TV, Daniel turned to Emma with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, leaning into him. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Do you ever feel overshadowed by your family's wealth? Like no matter what I do, I'll never measure up?" Emma's heart sank. She hadn't realized how deeply her parents' disapproval affected him. "Oh, Daniel. No, I don't feel overshadowed. Not by them anyway. If anything, I feel overshadowed by your strength and resilience. You've accomplished so much despite all the obstacles life threw at you. That's what inspires me." Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes remained troubled. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if you'll regret choosing me someday. If you'll look back and wish you'd pick someone who could give you the lifestyle you grew up with." Emma cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Listen to me. I don't care about lifestyles or bank accounts. Care about you. About the way you make me laugh, the way you support my dreams, the way you love me unconditionally. Those are the things that matter. Not money, not status, nothing else." For a moment, he simply stared at her, searching her eyes for any trace of doubt. Then slowly he nodded. "Believe you. But promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That if you ever start to feel differently, if you ever feel trapped or unhappy, you'll tell me. Because I'd rather lose you than keep you in a situation where you're miserable." Emma kissed him softly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Promise. But trust me, Daniel. You're not losing me anytime soon." A few days later, Emma found herself sitting across from her older cousin, Mia, at a trendy cafe downtown. Mia had always been something of a role model for Emma, a woman who defied societal norms and carved out her own path in life. When Emma confided in her about the recent turmoil, Mia listened intently, nodding along as she processed the details. "So let me get this straight," Mia said after Emma finished explaining. "Your dad wants to fund a business for you, which could give you financial independence, but Daniel feels threatened because of past insults from your parents. Meanwhile, you're stuck in the middle, trying to figure out how to balance love and ambition." Emma nodded miserably. "Pretty much." Mia leaned back in her chair, sipping her cappuccino thoughtfully. "Well, here's the thing. Relationships aren't black and white. Compromise is key, but so is communication. Have you considered involving Daniel in the decision-making process? Instead of viewing the business as something separate from him, make it something you build together." Emma frowned. "But he hates the idea of accepting help from my family." "Not necessarily," Mia countered. "What if you frame it differently? Instead of saying, 'My dad is funding this,' say, 'This is our chance to create something meaningful. to prove to everyone, including ourselves, that we can succeed on our terms. Emma's eyes widened as the idea took root. You think he'd go for that? It's worth a shot, Mia said with a shrug. At the very least, it shows him that you value his input and respect his feelings. Plus, starting a business together could bring you closer. It's a shared goal, a shared dream. Emma smiled faintly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe there was a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. The next evening, Emma decided to broach the topic with Daniel again. This time, she approached it differently, framing the idea as a collaborative venture rather than a solo endeavor. They sat together at their kitchen table, the remnants of dinner still scattered across the surface. Daniel, she began hesitantly, I've been thinking about Dad's offer. Not just for me but for us. He looked up from his coffee mug, his brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? I mean, she continued, choosing her words carefully. What if we started a business together? Something small and manageable, using Dad's funding as seed money. It wouldn't be charity. It would be an investment in our future. We could build something meaningful, something that reflects both of us. Daniel's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. You really think that could work? Emma nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Think about it, we'd have creative control, financial independence, and the chance to create something from scratch. Plus, it would show my parents, and maybe even ourselves, that we can succeed on our own terms. For a moment, Daniel was silent, mulling over her proposal. Then he smiled faintly, reaching across the table to take her hand. It's risky. But if it means proving to your family, and to ourselves, that we're capable of building something great, then I'm in. Relief washed over Emma as she squeezed his hand tightly. For the first time in weeks, she felt like they were truly moving forward, together. Over the following days, Emma threw herself into researching potential business ideas. She attended networking events hosted by her father, hoping to gain insights from successful entrepreneurs. At one such event, she met Sarah, a young woman who had turned her passion for sustainable fashion into a thriving boutique. As they chatted over hors d'oeuvres, Sarah shared her journey, from quitting her corporate job to launching her business with little more than determination and a dream. Her story reignited Emma's passion for pursuing something meaningful. You know, Sarah said with a knowing smile, the hardest part isn't starting. It's staying committed when things get tough. But trust me, if you believe in what you're doing, it'll all be worth it. Emma left the event feeling inspired but also conflicted. Building a business sounded exhilarating, but guilt crept in when she thought about how it might impact her relationship with Daniel. Would he feel overshadowed by her ambition? Or worse, resentful? That night, as they lay in bed, she voiced her concerns. Do you think I'm being selfish? She asked softly. Chasing this dream while putting everything else on hold? Daniel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. No, you're not selfish. You're ambitious, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That we tackle this together. No matter what happens, we face it side by side. Emma kissed him gently, grateful for his unwavering support. Together, they could navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. One restless night, unable to sleep, Emma grabbed a notebook and pen from her bedside drawer. She began writing 2 letters, one breaking off the engagement and another declining her father's offer. The act of putting her thoughts into words helped her process her emotions and clarify what she truly wanted. In the first letter, she poured out her fears about losing herself in the relationship, about sacrificing her dreams for someone else's expectations. In the second, she expressed gratitude for her father's generosity but explained why accepting his help would jeopardize her relationship with Daniel. By the time she finished, tears streaked her cheeks, but clarity replaced confusion. She realized that neither extreme, walking away from Daniel nor blindly accepting her father's offer, was the answer. What she needed was balance, a way to honor both her love for Daniel and her ambitions. She tucked the letters into her journal, resolving to revisit them later. For now, she climbed back into bed, snuggling against Daniel's warm embrace. As sleep finally claimed her, she felt hopeful, not because she had all the answers, but because she knew she wasn't alone in finding them. The next day, Sophie called, insisting they meet for lunch. When Emma arrived at the cafe, she found not only Sophie but also Mia waiting for her. Both wore expressions of determined concern. "We staged an intervention," Sophie announced without preamble, sliding a plate of fries toward Emma. "You've been carrying this burden alone for too long. It's time to let us help." Mia nodded emphatically. "Exactly. Communication is key. You need to sit down with Daniel and hash this out properly. Secrets and assumptions will only drive a wedge between you." Emma sighed, picking at the fries absently. "No. I've tried talking to him, but every time I bring it up, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." "Then stop tiptoeing," Sophie advised bluntly. "Lay it all out. Your fears, your dreams, your doubts. Trust me, honesty is always better than silence." Encouraged by their words, Emma resolved to have another heart-to-heart with Daniel. This time, she vowed to leave nothing unsaid. That evening, Emma and Daniel sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by papers and notes detailing their business plans. After hours of brainstorming, they paused to reflect on the bigger picture. "Daniel," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago." He looked at her expectantly, his gaze steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "Go ahead." "I'm scared," she admitted, tears welling up. "Scared of failing, of disappointing you, of losing myself in this whirlwind of decisions. But most of all, I'm scared of letting go of my dreams, or making you feel like you're holding me back." Daniel reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Em, you're not letting go of anything. Your dreams are valid just like mine. And as for feeling held back, I'd never want that for you. If anything, I want to push you forward, to support you in achieving everything you're capable of." Emma blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his sincerity. "Thank you. That means more to me than you'll ever know." Together, they embraced, drawing strength from each other's presence. Though uncertainties remained, they faced them united, a testament to the power of open communication and mutual respect. Determined to mend fences, Emma arranged a meeting with her father at his office. When she arrived, he greeted her with a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Emma," he said cautiously, gesturing for her to sit. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I wanted to talk about Daniel," she replied firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "About how you treated him last Christmas, and how it still affects our relationship today." Her father stiffened, clearly unprepared for such candor. "I already apologized for that," he muttered defensively. "Not enough," Emma countered. "Your apology was half-hearted, Dad. You acted like handing him a check was some grand gesture, but it came across as condescending, like you were trying to buy him off instead of respecting him as a person." Her father sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as if preparing for a difficult conversation. "Emma, I admit I may have handled things poorly, but my intentions were good. I only wanted to ensure your happiness." "And you think money equals happiness?" Emma challenged, her voice rising slightly. "Because it doesn't. What makes me happy is Daniel. His love, his support, his belief in me. Until you understand that, you'll never truly accept him." Her father fell silent, visibly shaken by her words. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You're right. I was wrong to treat him that way. And I apologize. Not just to you but to him as well." Though reconciliation wasn't immediate, progress was made in mending their fractured relationship. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to hope that healing was possible. Inspired by her discussions, Emma pitched a collaborative idea to Daniel, starting a small venture together using savings rather than relying on her family. He agreed enthusiastically, seeing it as a way to build something meaningful without compromising his principles. They spent countless hours drafting business plans, researching markets, and sketching out designs for their hypothetical storefront. Each step brought them closer, strengthening their bond as partners in every sense of the word. Excitement replaced uncertainty as they envisioned a future built on shared goals and mutual respect. Together, they celebrated small victories, securing a modest loan, finalizing a lease agreement, ordering inventory, all while keeping their eyes on the bigger prize. The couple dove headfirst into entrepreneurship, working tirelessly to launch their business. Challenges arose, testing their patience and teamwork, but they grew closer through shared effort. Meanwhile, Emma continued job hunting, keeping her options open. Late nights became routine as they juggled responsibilities, but laughter often punctuated their exhaustion. Through it all, they reminded themselves why they embarked on this journey: to prove to everyone, including themselves, that they could succeed on their terms. Their grand opening drew a modest crowd, friends and family mingling among curious strangers eager to see what the buzz was about. As Emma stood beside Daniel, watching customers browse their carefully curated selection, pride swelled within her chest. They had done it together. As the business gained traction, Emma's parents softened their stance, impressed by her determination and Daniel's dedication. Slowly, they started treating him with more respect, acknowledging his contributions to their daughter's life. Tensions eased, allowing for tentative healing within the family. Dinner invitations became less awkward, conversations less strained. While forgiveness took time, understanding paved the way for reconciliation. Emma watched with quiet satisfaction as her parents began to see Daniel not as a threat but as an ally, a man who loved their daughter fiercely and supported her dreams wholeheartedly. With newfound confidence, Emma secured a part-time position aligned with her career goals, balancing work with her entrepreneurial pursuits. She realized that having children didn't mean abandoning her ambitions. It just required careful planning and support. Broaching the topic of starting a family with Daniel, she found him surprisingly receptive. "We'll figure it out," he assured her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Just like we figured out everything else." Together, they mapped out a timeline, prioritizing stability before expanding their household. For the first time, Emma felt ready, not just for marriage, but for the life they were building together. Months later, Emma and Daniel celebrated their successes, both personal and professional. Their business thrived, earning accolades from local media and loyal patrons alike. Meanwhile, Emma excelled in her part-time role, gaining valuable experience that bolstered her resume. One crisp autumn evening, as they toasted their achievements under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, Emma reflected on how far they'd come. From uncertain beginnings to triumphant milestones, their journey had been marked by growth, compromise, and unwavering love. "We did it," she murmured, leaning into Daniel's embrace. "Against all odds, we built something beautiful." He kissed the top of her head, smiling softly. "And we're just getting started." As they gazed into the future, hand in hand, Emma felt hopeful. Love and ambition weren't mutually exclusive. They coexisted, intertwined like roots anchoring a tree. With effort and understanding, anything was possible.